Purple Daily is daily Vikings entertainment. We just want the Vikings to win a Super Bowl before we die.
I will ride with this group.
Seriously, man. Please.
And away we go.
All right, Judd. A little Saturday check-down episode here on Purple Daily. We're just going to pop in, say hello for about 15 minutes. We will do a full Vikings draft recap episode Sunday. We're tentatively planned for it to be a Thursday on a Sunday, but that dude is one of the busiest guys in the country this weekend.
Gotta have him. Gotta have him.
We're tentatively, but his schedule's kind of up in the air. But since we last convened, we did our little live stream from 6 to 7 o'clock just to start the second round of the draft. And what's crazy is halfway through that stream, the storyline for the draft was, wow, Shedeur Sanders hasn't gone yet. And then we end our stream, and we're on the text thread like an hour later. He still hasn't gone. So he still hasn't gone as of right now, which is the big national story. But the Vikings wind up drafting their second offensive player of the first two rounds, Maryland wide receiver Tai Felton. 6'1", 6'2", depending on which publication or measurement you look at. Most of them lean 6'1", 186. He ran a 4.38 40-yard dash. Wildly productive at Maryland last year. It was a lot of the earlies. He did crush Virginia, but it was a lot of like Villanova's. He's kind of stacked his numbers early in the year, but he is a weapon. 96 catches, 1,100 yards, 9 touchdowns. The Vikings, they picked him after executing that trade with the Texans, where they moved from 97 down to 102. So they moved back 5 spots in the third round, and they pick up 45 spots on the back end, swapping the 187 for the 142. So Tai Felton in the house. The Vikings put a video out on social media behind the scenes in the war room, and everyone seemed to love this pick. Clearly, he was someone that they were after as a weapon, as a guy that you can get the ball to in close quarters, and he can make something happen with his 4.38 40-yard dash speed. So your thoughts, Judd, on Tai Felton specifically, but also just the Vikings with their 4 picks going offense with the first 2 of them?
I think the receiver pick, which we talked about the possibility, because it makes sense. I think the receiver pick is super intriguing. First of all, it does scream to me that they thought that he was the best player, though, because there are positions where you could have said, well, we need a cornerback more, for instance, or something like that. So I love this based on that. I'm not going to claim to be a Tai Felton expert, but I will say
I have his Raz profile in front of me if you're interested at some point.
There's a couple things I like here. One, he played a lot of special teams. It looks like in 2022, he had 6 kick returns, 25 yards. He has, in a very small capacity, returned punts before, which intrigues me. But what intrigues me more, Phil, is the big picture outlook here. Like you don't take, I don't think, in my opinion, a 3rd round pick's not like some flyer. Like I just hope now I know they haven't worked before, okay? So I'm not promising anything. But I think you take a 3rd round receiver for a purpose. What I see is immediate competition, I think, for the 3 spot, the nailer spot. What I see is the fact that they do need to add some depth there. I'll keep saying this. I think at training camp, we're going to find out that Jordan Addison's been suspended for 3 games, or at least 2 games. And the other thing is, Naylor, keep in mind as well, is going into the last year of his rookie contract, because those are 4-year contracts. And so this to me is super, super interesting. And I do like the fact that I guess that the Vikings were on the same page that our outstanding show is, which is you could use a receiver. Like just because you got people in that room doesn't mean that you're really all that set. Jefferson outstanding, Addison as long as he is here clear cut too. But it would not shock me if Tai Felton certainly competes in training camp for the 3rd spot. It really would not. And remember, I like Naylor as well. He did catch touchdown passes, but he had some very key drops. So I would have no problem if in training camp pretty quickly we see that Tai Felton is at least given a chance to go up the depth chart very, very quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, and Rondale Moore, too, coming off injury. So we'll see.
Yeah.
I don't know. He might be a guy that on paper looks like a perfect fit, but the health and he's a little bit older. obviously the Tai Felton. So, yeah, first of all, I watch the Vikings sometimes and think, man, if they just had like another burner or like a little weapon, like a third wide receiver that could get the ball and make a huge play happen. It sometimes feels like when you're watching the Lions offense and a couple other teams, I mean the Dolphins at times over the past few years, and they're just so fast on offense. And the Vikings haven't felt that way as often. So I love the emphasis on a guy who runs a sub 4.4 40-yard dash here. The Vikings have some success with Maryland wide receivers in those middle rounds with Stephon Diggs back in the day. And by the way, Keenan McCardell was Stephon Diggs' wide receiver coach then too. McCardell was featured in the social media video too because they kept passing the phone around, and he was beaming from ear to ear that they drafted another Maryland guy here. But yeah, so I love the idea on paper. I think it's fascinating that they have passed on a number of different opportunities for cornerbacks, for safeties. Maybe it means that they do have a cornerback lined up. Maybe it means that the Purple Daily Anonymous tip line is correct on an Asante Samuel Jr. I do think it means for sure that Isaiah Rodgers, who was a rotational player with the Eagles, is really highly regarded as maybe a starting caliber player at corner for the Vikings. But if you zoom out even further, if you're Kevin O'Connell and you're Kwesi and you're looking at this thing, you got limited picks. Are you going to go defense or offense round one, and then with the 97th and the 102nd pick, I guess? You had a top 5 scoring defense last year with kind of an imperfect roster construction because you did not get organic pressure up the middle. You had to manufacture pressure with the highest blitz rate in the NFL. But even with kind of an imperfect set of defensive players, you were 5th in scoring defense, and you were, I think, 1st in sack and pressure rate. If not, you were definitely top 5 at getting after quarterbacks and top 5 at holding teams to low point totals. And you go in and then you add Hargrave, you add Jonathan Allen, you bring in Isaiah Rodgers, you lose Cam Bynum, but they love Theo Jackson. I think the biggest missing piece from the Vikings going from a fringe contender to an actual contender is turn that offense from the 10th best offense into the 3rd best offense. Offensive line, upgrade, check. Red zone running back, upgrade, check. Add another weapon here that runs a 4.38 40-yard dash. So I kind of love that they're just leaning into offense with these 2 draft picks.
If you didn't force a defensive back because you felt that there was not one there that would fit a 3rd round profile, then that's a lesson that you've learned, and that's a good thing. I will say there was immediate scuttlebutt that the Vikings actually were targeting at their original at the 97 Xavier Watts, the safety from your club, from your Notre Dame club, but that the Falcons traded up, I believe, to get him 1 pick before at 96, and that's when the Vikings went back. So there might have been a safety targeted there, but it feels like in previous incarnations here, we've certainly seen the Vikings maybe force the position with the next best player available at that spot. And I would far prefer that if you had a receiver targeted, that you said, okay, we don't have to take any one position, because the defensive back thing too is it would be nice to build there, but you are like desperate. Like, this is not like if you don't get a cornerback or a safety, you are in trouble. So I like this. And I think that in 2025, but especially going forward after this season, I think the wide receiver room outside of Justin Jefferson is an intriguing conversation. It's one I feel like a lot of fans don't want to have, but I think it's an intriguing conversation.
Yeah. A couple other things about Tai Felton here. So I did pull up his relative athletic score, his RAS profile.
Football.
And so it's on a 0 to 10 scale, and it takes your measurables, like your height, weight, and then it takes like your vertical jump, your broad jump, 40-yard dash, 20-yard split, 10-yard split, all these different combine or pro day testing things. And it rates you on a 1 to 10 or a 0 to 10 scale. And also it ranks you based historically, all wide receivers since 1987.
That's crazy.
And he had a 9.6 out of 10 relative athletic score. Tested off the charts. He had, on a 0 to 10 scale, a 9.5 vertical jump, a 9.6 broad jump, elite. So elite vertical, elite broad, elite 40-yard dash with the 4.38, elite 20-yard split, elite 10-yard split. So Tai Felton is a super athlete. 60% of his targets last season, this is interesting, 60% of his targets at Maryland last year were within 9 yards of the line of scrimmage. So a lot of little bubble screen or tunnel screens, short yardage stuff, bang, get him the ball and let him use his speed.
Yep.
And I kind of love this because the Vikings already have, with Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson, these brilliant intermediate and deep route running guys that require attention, oftentimes bracket coverage, right? So if you have a counterpunch over here in Tai Felton, where it's, all right, so Jefferson's on this side, he's requiring attention. This side of the field's a little more open. Boom, quick pass, use your speed, 8 yards. Kind of love that. Also, 30% of his snaps last year, Tai Felton came in the slot. So he can play outside, he can play inside. I don't know what the Vikings' vision is for him, but he's a yang to Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison's yang in some ways, and could just provide, hey, if he's the third guy out there in 11 personnel and you got to pay attention to these two other guys and TJ Hawkinson, all of a sudden you got Tai Felton one-on-one against a safety or something, or I don't know, a linebacker. There's a lot of fun possibilities here.
Yeah, short passes. So this, and I do think that there is a chance here, given his health and where he's at career-wise, that Rondale Moore does not make it out of training camp. And this is sort of the same description. Because, line the guy up in the backfield perhaps once in a while, get him the ball on short passes. It's an 8-yard pass that turns into a 64-yard touchdown because of speed. So this, you know what? And I think this is a good thing. The Vikings have clearly done and are doing everything within their power to insulate J.J. McCarthy as far as trying to make sure that he has as many weapons and as much protection as possible.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, you know what? When O'Connell says, and it's a famous quote now, but when O'Connell says that teams often fail young quarterbacks more than the young quarterbacks fail the teams, that goes beyond, I think, the approach of how the person is cultivated, right, and brought along. That includes this. That includes giving that player, that quarterback, enough weapons and enough protection where at least for a year or so, he never has to put the team on his shoulders consistently.
Mm-hmm.
And all of these things, offensive line now looks really, really stout, really stout. From a receiver standpoint, this sort of gives the Vikings the type of receiver that they really haven't had of late, to your point. So I think when we look at what the mission here is for McCarthy, and the conversation is fun, can he go out and be an immediate impact MVP type of player? But the Vikings know that's probably not possible, and it's not fair to ask him that. So I think what we're seeing is a very, very wise approach to how do you make J.J. McCarthy as successful as possible?
Yeah.
This is how. Give him the weapons, and not just the weapons, but the weapons in different forms. You got Jefferson, Addison, now a shorter yardage wide receiver, catch passes, get Yak. You got Hawkinson. You're just giving him a variety of things in which he can excel without it being on him necessarily alone.
On the offensive line front, real quick, and then I have a speculative question to wrap this episode for you. I don't know if you saw they put the clip out too from the war room of the Donovan Jackson pick, and Kevin O'Connell hops on the phone, and he's O'Connell is just giddy, I think, over both these picks, offensive guys. And he said to Donovan Jackson, "Are you ready to get in here and join this offensive line room?" And I can't remember exactly how he phrased it, but he said one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. Are you ready to join one of the best offensive lines in the NFL? So he goes from being irate at the end of the season about his sieve offensive line in the interior that gives up 9 sacks. Now, we actually went through the film, and Darnold was probably responsible for half those for just playing patty cake, but straight from Kevin O'Connell's mouth, after 2 months of free agency and a first-round draft pick, he believes the Vikings now have one of the best offensive lines in the NFL.
On paper, don't you agree? I do.
They do.
Like, health provided, that's the most important thing. But if you have the 5 that we think are going to start, and I loved that kid, his introductory presser to me, he is the
Very
definition
mature.
because he's mature. And the thing that I think gets overlooked or forgotten too is the good offensive linemen are often some of the smartest guys in the locker room.
Yeah,
It takes
like good dudes, you know.
Well, and it takes a lot to play that spot. Like, it's not just blocking; you've got to be a very intelligent player. So, yeah, I think that after going through the clips of his introductory presser on Friday, I was really impressed. This is not just a guy who's going to go out there and meat and potatoes it. This is a guy that gets the mission, I think. So I don't blame O'Connell. And credit to the Vikings, man. We spent a lot of years saying, are you sure about that interior line? And they finally said, yeah, you know what, guys? We weren't so sure.
Yeah. And one last thought on the Donovan Jackson thing. The hardest part about the draft process and then the 2 to 3 years that follow as he tried to turn these players into actual NFL guys, it's trying to project, can they get better? Can they? Because all these dudes, for the most part, have some flaw or something. And the further you go along in the draft, you're drafting on potential and you're looking to iron out certain flaws. And if you have a guy that is super high character, smart, interacts well with people, all these things, those are the things that we don't get as much access to as just media, because we don't sit behind closed doors like Kevin did to watch film with Donovan Jackson. Because you're trying to figure out, all right, we can draft one of 4 different offensive linemen here. They all have some flaws, and if you threw them into the fire right now, they'd all get cooked because they've never played in the NFL. Which one of them has the best chance to go from here to here in his development over 2 years? And just consuming some of the Donovan Jackson interviews and just getting a vibe for his demeanor just seems like a really sharp, high IQ, high character guy, I guess.
Yeah, and then take this too. So put a guy who's got that potential, and he might struggle a bit at first. Like, it's a big transition from the college game to the pro game. But think about this. So Blake Brandel is a nice player, but at the end of the day, he's probably a Jag, right? He's just a guy. He's not bad, but he's just a guy. And to go back to what we've discussed, which is look at what Blake Brandel did with Christian Darrisaw to his left. Mm-hmm. Now put a first-round pick there. And again, insulate him for a year or 2, or I don't know how many, or 10 with Christian Darrisaw. Like, he can make significant strides while having a Pro Bowl player who helps him. Because the Brandel thing's not a fluke. Like, that's not a fluke. Christian Darrisaw
his play dropped off.
Yeah. But Christian Darrisaw took Brandel's play up how much? 8 notches, 7 notches. Mm-hmm. So, and that's the thing about the line as a whole too. I mean, it operates as one. So if you have a weak link, you can cover for it, but it can't be too weak.
Yeah. Okay, just a quick speculative question for you. And I ask this at the end of the episode because I know that by the time most people consume this Saturday check down edition, that it's very possible Shedeur Sanders has been drafted. Although there's some speculation that if he's been passed on this many times,
I saw that last
is
night,
it possible he could just go undrafted? But the Vikings going into day 3 have the 139 and the 142. So they got their 2 5th-round picks. I think they're going to turn those into like some 6th and some 7ths. My guess is they wind up making like 4 picks today instead of the 2.
Sure.
Is there any circumstance in which you would select Shedeur Sanders if you're the Vikings?
I don't think so, because I think the league has, and I mean, this is a really intricate discussion. Like, I don't think any of the surface level portions of this are like the main thing. I think there's a lot that goes into this, but keep in mind, Kevin O'Connell does not take a quarterback unless he thinks that quarterback is fit for his rehab school. So he will not just take. It's not like come one, come all, everybody come into the.
Yeah.
He has definitely made a lot of decisions on. I don't want that guy. And as much as teams, just from the bottom line standpoint now, as much as teams might say, distractions, we don't pay attention to anything. We don't have Twitter in our building or X, or we don't have this or that. The reality is whoever drafts him now is going to be bringing in sort of a circus of, and it's even worse now because he's fallen so much. Yeah. So like day one of training camp. So no, I don't think the Vikings, I think O'Connell is very cognizant of not just the culture, but sort of the vibe and like the harmony. Like both of these kids so far that they have picked, listen to them. They're ready to go to work. They're very, you can tell they're very football guys, right? Shedeur brings a lot of things. So I don't think, unfortunately for him, because it's too bad, I don't think he qualifies for the KOC quarterback rehabilitation school.
Yeah. On one hand, he fits perfectly into the Kwesi philosophy of buying stocks when they're at their lowest point. Usually it's a player that was a highly drafted guy, a Sam Darnold or whoever it may be, a first or second round pick, and 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years go past, but you feel like, okay, maybe he never lived up to the potential, but we can still get something out of this player. Mm-hmm. The stock has fallen very fast. I think even like the way Sean Payton was talking about him yesterday, like I don't think it's fair to say that every NFL team had this dude as like a day 3 pick for whatever reason on their board, but I think the 5 or 6 teams that really needed a quarterback all had a bad vibe or a bad feeling about Shedeur. I have another theory too, that is it possible that in his and Dion's plight to maybe manipulate the landing spot, did he purposefully either sabotage or not show his best in some of the discussions with teams? Like, did he go into Cleveland thinking, I don't want to go to Cleveland, so I'm going to maybe sabotage, thus further lowering the amount of teams that might be interested? It's a no for me on the Vikings for 2 main reasons. One, I think J.J. McCarthy is better, so it wouldn't be like a competition going into the season. I want J.J. McCarthy to have a runway. And 2, I don't know that Shedeur is suited to just kind of take a deep breath and be a backup. I think his dad views him as a starter. He views himself as a starter. Like, it is kind of a circus vibe. You're going to have all these questions. But I do think the best thing that could happen for him is to go to a team like the Vikings or the Rams or the 49ers, like team where it's like, all right, this was an unexpected landing spot. There's already an incumbent starter that there's 0 questions about who the starting quarterback's going to be. Yep. You can just take a deep breath for a year and wrap your head around what happened. But I mean, the fact that he's sitting there going into day 4, one of the best players on the board, like any team, including the Vikings, should at least have a meeting about it in a war room.
Oh, and I'm sure it's been discussed. And you know what? Going into the draft, it was probably discussed by a bunch of teams. Now, I think part of the thing too is we've seen reports that he didn't fare well in the interview process. But we have no idea. Like, it could go much deeper than that. Like, we don't know what was said. Yeah. We don't know what he said. We don't know if he said, I don't want to play here or what. But I would liken this to if you now bring him to your training camp, I think that this becomes, if this had been the case, if Manti Te'o was a quarterback. And I mean, that was a linebacker, and that was sort of a circus off of him being catfished. But I mean, it was still a big story. Yeah. But I mean, this is going to be whoever gets him. I don't know how you sort of hide him at this point. So yeah, but a lesson has been learned, which is if you are not one of the greatest quarterbacks to come into the draft, you probably shouldn't be like talking before or have it out there that you're only going to go to like the Cowboys or something.
And maybe you shouldn't have a customized draft room in your home with legendary signs.
I was going to ask you, can I get one for next
Well,
year's
you
draft.
are a legend.
No,
so
but I
yeah,
mean, I would like you, like, can I get the company to come to my house and customize like 2
Yes.
rooms with these? And what's the box? There's like there's like a room there with legendary, and then they show like this box he was supposed to like. I don't even know. I don't even get it. It was it was awesome.
By the way, our guy Thor just tweeted this like 10 minutes ago. And again, by the time people listen, it's very likely that he gets drafted early in the 4th or something. But Thor answered a question from our guy Skull Bros on Twitter. So Skull Bros says, "Would you take Shador if you were the Vikings?" And Thor says, "Absolutely. There's no longer a risk. You bring him in, and if he thinks he runs the team, you can cut him because he's a day 3 pick at this point. You bring him in, and he's humbled himself and ready to put his head down and work. And at minimum, you have a QB2 on a multi-year peanut salary that might turn into a trade asset at some point. Or maybe something happens with McCarthy. I don't think I would do it, but I would trust Kevin O'Connell to make that evaluation, and it's definitely something they should talk about.
I guess I personally, and it's a PTSD thing too. I always fear the circus.
Yeah, it'd be a circus.
Like I've seen the circus, and I don't like. Well, I shouldn't say that. For our show's purposes, or back in my Star Tribune days, let me be very clear. Circus was fun. If I'm an executive or I'm O'Connell, I probably don't want the circus. And look, you know what? I believe this too. The Vikings from day one of OTAs next month, when they get on that field, it is get to work time. It's all business. Like this is all business. You've got a team. I think we are seeing the construction of an offense, and we've seen the construction of a defense where I think the McCarthy thing, like, yes, he might struggle. I'm not saying he's going to be great right away, but they have created an environment there where I don't think there's anyone that you look at right now and say, it's going to be tough for player X to succeed.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Oh, man, I'd love to be a fly on the wall right now. They probably didn't do a ton of legwork on Shador, because why would they? But I guarantee they've had people working on this overnight into day 3. Oh, my gosh.
I'll bet you O'Connell, when he finally goes home, I bet you he does a ton of personal QB work. I bet you he was
his hobby.
Right. But I'm saying, I bet you Kevin O'Connell knows more about Shador than the average head coach. Because my guess is he puts the kids to bed, he kisses the wife, and he goes downstairs and he personally grinds QB film.
I'm just saying, I know you don't like the circus, but be 10% on alert for a crazy emergency episode on this Saturday. That's all I'm saying.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. For sure. I'm just advising that I don't think it would be the best idea. But I'm the same guy who thinks there's a very good chance that in 2026, the Vikings are going to go to training camp with Anthony Richardson as their backup quarterback.
Yeah, I can see that. All right. That 15 minutes turned into almost a half hour, as is usually the case here.
Can't help myself.
So much happening. He's the sports dad, Judd. I'm Phil. Purple Daily. Click that like button and the subscribe button on the Purple Daily YouTube channel. And you can also help us keep growing this thing by giving us a 5-star rating and a positive review on Apple and Spotify. We just want the Vikings to win a Super Bowl before we die.